Hey ranchers, ever considered opening up your land for hunting, fishing, or other recreational activities? LandTrust.com connects you with responsible outdoorsmen who are willing to pay for access to your property. It's a great way to earn extra income while sharing your love of the land. LandTrust handles the bookings and screening, so you can relax and focus on what matters most to your ranch. Head over to LandTrust.com or just click the link in the show notes today and see if it's the right fit for you. Now, saddle up, partners. Welcome back to Ranching Reboot, where we challenge your thinking about food, farms, and the folks who make it all happen. This week, we're joined by fellow Cowboy podcaster, Matt McKinley. Matt takes us on a ride from his Kansas roots to wrangling cattle in Nevada. We'll dive deep into the Dust Bowl, the New Deal's impact on ranching, and the challenges facing modern cowboys. But that's not all. We'll also lasso in topics like sustainability, comparing cowboy life to the military, and the squeeze of big meat packers. We won't shy away from the big stuff either, from the Israel-Gaza conflict to U.S. politics and navigating COVID. Expect a blend of humor, hard truths, and personal stories that'll make you laugh, think, and see the world through a rancher's lens. So, whether you're a seasoned rancher or a curious city slicker, this episode is guaranteed to be a compelling listen.
All right, I think we got all 17 of the recordings going. Matt McKinley, how are you today, man?
Man, I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
You know, I woke up at 5:30 to a hell of a windstorm and a whole bunch of rain and said, this is nice. I'll just roll over and go back to sleep.
Nice. You're in Kansas?
Yeah, I'm in South Central Kansas, about halfway between Colorado and Missouri, 20 miles from Oklahoma.
Okay. You're straight east of where I used to be.
Yeah, you were out in Syracuse for a while, yeah?
Yeah, I grew up in Walsh, Colorado, which is the town itself is about 30-ish from the Oklahoma border, and then about 15 from Kansas, and I grew up south of there. So my house was 8 miles from Oklahoma, about 15 from Kansas, 45 from the northeast corner of New Mexico, and then about 60 from the Texas Panhandle.
About 2 hours to a Walmart?
Pretty close, yeah. Depending on who was driving. Nowadays, it's probably hour 15, hour 20, but my mom never was in a hurry when she was driving, so.
Hey, that part of the world, Southwest Kansas, Southeast Colorado, Oklahoma Panhandle, there's like 7 people that live there.
Yeah. It's funny, like I live out in Nevada now, and I'm like right up against the California line. And they talk about Okies, particularly in the rural parts of Nevada and California. They talk about Okies quite a bit. And what they're referring to is more like south of you Okies, where more like southeast Oklahoma, Arkansas area, where you had a lot of sharecropping. Whereas out on the panhandle of Oklahoma, southwest Kansas, southeast Colorado, which also could, from every other part of the country, could be classify all those people as Okies because it's kind of the same area. But I think the numbers were like 75% of the people that were present during the Dust Bowl in that part of the world ended up staying, whereas like a huge number of the sharecroppers in southeast Oklahoma and Arkansas and Missouri, they left because they didn't own their property, whereas my neck of the woods was more homesteaders. So even though there was nothing out there and you couldn't raise a crop, you at least had something. You owned the land. And because of that, and then New Deal programs, a lot of people ended up staying in that part of the world. Well, a lot comparatively. But that being said, there wasn't many people to start with, and there was even less after the Dust Bowl ended, and there's getting kind of be less by the day, it seems like.
You get west of Highway 35 and population density starts to drop off pretty freaking rapidly.
It's a tough place, tough part of the world to make a living in. It really is.
So I want to hear a little bit about your story. So you spent some time around Syracuse. Like, just tell me a little bit about your story.
All right. So I was born in Denver, Colorado. I was a Army brat. Um, had a not a great childhood. Won't go into a whole lot of it, but I ended up being put in foster care when I was 9, and then bounced around there a little bit. I was I had a really pretty good experience as far as foster kids go. Like, you hear some horror stories, and I didn't have any
Yeah.
of that. It was like the system itself sucks, but I didn't get beat. I didn't get molested. Any of that type of kind of typical horror stories you hear out of the foster system. I grew up in a really good community. I criticize my community I grew up in quite a bit for some of their ways of thinking, but as far as the people go, I got nothing bad to say about them. They're really good, solid, decent people that live in that part of the world. And so when I don't know how old I was when I moved back to Tobacco County, Colorado, but my dad was in the Army. I was drafted out of or just out of high school, drafted to go to Vietnam. Spent two deployments over there. Transferred to the Colorado National Guard and was pretty much a lifer in the National Guard until I think he retired as a sergeant. Kind of.
Oh, that was your dad. That was the non-vet, not you.
That was my dad, the vet.
Okay.
So I lived with him till I was about 9, and so there's a lot I don't really know about him. But he transitioned out of the military, and National Guard even when I was pretty young. He was deployed to the Persian Gulf during the Operation Desert Storm. And then shortly after that, he retired out. I was put in foster care, and then my last foster home ended up being the people that adopted me, Wes and Janice McKinley, who I call my parents nowadays. I started living with them when I was almost 11, I think,
Okay.
and then it was like 14 or so when the adoption process finally took place. They live 20 miles south of Walsh. My mom passed away in 2011, and my dad's still alive and kicking, raising hell. He's a pretty interesting character. Cowboy by trade, politician somewhat by choice. He had a kind of a roundabout way of becoming a Colorado state legislator, but he was on a grand jury back in the late 80s, early 90s, somewhere in that period. There was a nuclear bomb factory outside of Denver that was under investigation for a whole bunch of things, but the main part was polluting the environment. And they absolutely were. And he was elected the foreman of a grand jury that brought indictments. I think I don't think anything really went anywhere. But he wrote a book about it. He was put under a gag order because it was a federal grand jury, and he ended up running for the U.S. House in '96. Not with any real aspirations of winning, but on the off chance that he did, he'd be able to release all the grand jury testimony, and but that was his like kind of first foray into politics, and he rode the 4th District of Colorado, which essentially at the time was from I-25 to the eastern border, and then from the southern border to the northern border. It was a pretty big chunk of land.
So pretty much Eastern Plains and did he get Front Range? Like, did he get Pueblo Springs?
I don't think Pueblo was in it, but Fort Collins and Greeley were in it. And Loveland, like that kind of northern Front Range was on there, which is now different district. But so he rode horseback, and then particularly his mule, Marvin the Mule. He rode that entire district a horseback campaigning. Got a lot of attention, not very many votes. I think he ended up with about 2% of the vote. Ran as an independent. And then fast forward, that was when I first came to live with him. And then fast forward to my I guess it had been my sophomore year first is when he ran. He was recruited by the Republicans in our district for the state house.
After he ran as an independent.
Yeah. So he was recruited by the Republicans to run as a Democrat. They didn't like the guy they had in office. He was kind of big money entrenched as far as Colorado goes. You know, there's some pretty big money in Colorado, even back before the tech boom. There was,
There's always been
uh,
money in Aspen.
that, and people just don't realize how much money meatpacking makes. Like
Oh,
that's
it's
a big
insane.
player in every level of politics. If there's a meatpacking, some sort of meatpacking industry around, it's big money and big influence and a lot of kind of unseen influence from if you zoom out from people that work in agriculture, like it's kind of a unseen kingmaker type of position. Like the Tyson, JBS is a little different story, being foreign owned, but they still carry big weight. But Cargill, Tyson, like those American companies, I mean, they carry big time influence because they make a lot of money and they're necessary. They're absolutely necessary.
Yes, I agree with everything you said. That the vertical integration, the concentration of the packers, it I don't see that there's an upside for guys like me as a producer, anybody that works in the industry upstream of processing. It it doesn't work for anybody. You know,
No,
it only works for them. I guess it works for the shareholders of Tyson, JBS, and Cargill.
yeah, yeah. I'll wrap up my little intro before we get back into that because I that's a topic I want to discuss quite a bit. But anyway, the Republicans didn't like this guy for whatever reason, and they were hoping. I don't think they wanted my dad to win, but they wanted to kind of hold this guy's feet to the fire a little bit. And he was a 3-term incumbent. Colorado has a 4-term limit, so he ends up losing in a very close race. And then he ran again in 2004. That was the year I graduated high school. So when the race was really on, I was just off to college. I went up to Fort Collins at Colorado State. He ends up winning pretty handily. I would think he had like 53 or 54% of the vote, something like that. Actually, it might have been 55. I don't think he ever got less than 55% of the vote as a Democrat in a very, very heavy Republican district.
Wow.
And so anyway, he ended up doing 4 terms as a state representative. Uh, he kind of became somewhat of an environmental activist after the whole Rocky Flats bomb case, but not like these types that are gluing their hands to priceless paintings or throwing soup on stuff for some reason. I'm not
That's
sure how
just
that.
stupidity.
I'm not sure what the soup has to do with much, but I mean
The
it's
one I thought that
interesting.
was hilarious, and I probably got some details wrong, is there was a group of activists and they went to like a car show. I think it
Mhm.
was a huge car show in Europe, and they were going to protest, internal combustion vehicles. So they went and they glued their hands to the floor, like in front of a Porsche or something.
Yeah.
And the guys are just like, okay, now what? So they like put cones up around these people. And then when it was time to go home, they just turned the lights off and left. And these guys were there had their hands glued to the floor. And they started complaining about how they're being treated. Like, hold up. You went in and glued your hands to the floor and you didn't have a plan to feed yourself or go to the bathroom. You're just going
I
to
don't.
glue yourself to the floor and protest and expect the people you're protesting against to take care of your basic humanitarian needs. Get real.
Yeah. Yeah, you go into a private business, which I mean, it's Europe, so I don't know how private it is, but either way, like you go into somebody else's, it's like going into somebody's house and stapling your hand to the floor and then bitching about how they didn't give you medical care. Like, well, you're kind of
Yeah.
lucky you didn't get shot in the face, so be happy about that. Yeah, it's wild, but yeah. So he spent 8 years in Denver doing some things. I during this whole time I grew up as as a city kid, if you will, for Southeast Colorado. I grew up in town, so I was a city kid.
Okay, how big is Walsh, Colorado?
Walsh nowadays, like 300-400 people. Before I moved there, like we're from whenever, like a couple months to 2 years or however, I moved down to Campo, Colorado, and I was there till I was 9. And Campo is even smaller than Walsh. It's the first town in Colorado as you're coming up from Texas and Oklahoma on 287. And it really is just a stop sign on a blacktop kind of deal. It was it's a weird part of the world, man. It's so Boise City, Oklahoma was the not the closest town, but it was for Campo. It was either Springfield was about 20 miles and Springfield, Colorado, or Boise City, Oklahoma was about 35. And Boise City was, I want to say it was a little bit bigger, but not by much. I mean, but Boise City, Oklahoma was considered the geographical center of the Dust Bowl. And so it's and Boise City, Oklahoma, funny little offside. They were founded on a complete fabrication. Like they printed off a bunch of flyers advertising this free land, which was semi-true, you know, as homesteader type stuff. But the pictures that they used were from back in Iowa, some little like picturesque town in Iowa. And then these homesteaders get off the train and they're just like tumbleweeds blowing across the prairie, and you're just like, oh, we've kind of been had. But
I imagine there was a lot of that happened back in the Old West days.
Oh man, land rush, man. It was a wild. At least Oklahoma, you had to go claim your land. You had to go haul ass to it. But
unless you cheated and you went down a couple days before.
Well, I mean, are you really American if you're not cheating a little bit?
Locks just keep honest people honest.
I mean, we didn't exactly play fair against the Brits to win this deal. We didn't exactly play fair against anybody to take the rest of it. So it's and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Is it right? Probably not. But am I glad we did? A little bit.
Okay. I mean, the world would definitely be a much different place. And, you know, everybody wants to win because winning means you get to hide the history that makes you look bad.
Right. Yeah. It's, but anyway, Boise City, Oklahoma, which was based on founded on a complete lie, but, it's, yeah, I grew up just north of there, and so I lived in town. So I was a city kid. I was not a farm ranch kid, even though I lived in a completely farming and ranching community. And then when I went to live with my parents, they lived 20 miles south of Walsh, and we had just kind of a homestead type operation. My dad was a day worker cowboy. His bulk of his income came from doing maintenance and readings on natural gas wells. And then he just kind of made a living, you know, just did whatever. He did some welding, day work cowboy, just was a teacher early on, graduated from Oklahoma Panhandle State University, and was a math teacher for pretty brief amount of time, you know, like 3-4 years, something like that. It didn't last very long before he went to doing other stuff. And but I grew up kind of helping out around the ranch. I learned how to ride horses. Didn't particularly care for it at the time because it was something I had to do. And but kind of grew up into a rough string rider of sorts. Nothing like the big ranch rough stock guys, but
what do you mean by that?
That means mostly you're breaking the young horses, or and then there's other guys that specifically work with like problem type horses that, you know, just don't want to stop bucking or something. And I did a little bit of that, but nothing nothing too serious. I rode a lot of colts from my dad, and I didn't know what a good cow horse was until I was probably, I don't know, 17, before I got on. I had to go do cattle work on something that actually knew what it was doing, that I wasn't just steering around two-handed. And then cowboying became kind of fun, because the horse was working with me and not against me, and I was focused. We were both focused on the same task instead of just trying to keep the wreck from happening. Like the wreck usually happens, but you try to slow it down and steer it into a soft landing, I suppose. And that was most of my cowboying career till I was just about out of high school, honestly. And then I got to kind of liking it. I went to school. Originally, I was declared major as communications. I was going to be some sort of communications major, and that lasted about as long as my orientation, and I had to go sign up, and I saw who my classmates were going to be, and I was like, holy shit, where's all the regular guys? And so I didn't immediately clashed with that set of people. Little foreshadowing into my future endeavors, but
Like, this is not my tribe.
right. So I switched my major to ag business fairly early on, like a couple of weeks into the semester, and then I later added animal science and double majored in that. Graduated in about 4.5 years. Did a lot of odd jobs through college. Just kind of I thought a pretty typical college experience. Had a lot of fun. I'm not sure how much I actually learned. If it wasn't for all the classes, I would have had all the fun in college. But I still had a pretty good share of the fun. And so I end up like, I worked at the school farm for a little while. I worked at another school farm with the research department, and so it was a USDA grant for CSU, and we were studying winter wheat. So I spent a lot of time in the lab cutting shoots of wheat. So I had to have to take one stalk, and I'd cut the head, then I'd cut at the first joint and measure the joint, and then you'd have to count all the kernels of wheat, and then enter that into a database. And it was some pretty mind-numbing stuff, but it paid well. And then I worked for a guy. My favorite job in college by far was I worked for this guy Brett Boddicker. He Rocky Mountain Wildlife Services. He catches enough heat that he can handle somebody getting pissed off from a podcast. But essentially, his business was exterminating prairie dogs for ranchers, and as I worked for him for 2.5 years, I think. And the further along we got more clients that were land developers around the Denver, Boulder, that area is just, I mean, it was, Front Range is still exploding with, but even back then, that was 2007-ish. That was when the boom was like really kind of starting, and then the market fell off, and because one of their plans was for me to run a southern branch of their business when I graduated, and then the economy went to hell, and I was more interested in playing cowboy anyways. Looking back on it, that probably would have been a hell of a job. I'd been a lot wealthier than I am now if that had panned out.
So, interestingly enough, I kind of do have a little bit of observational history, I guess, of Eastern Colorado and the Front Range. My sister went to the Air Force Academy.
Okay.
So there were a lot of trips from Sun City to Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
And, she graduated. I joined the Navy. After I got out of the Navy, I moved back, and I kind of got into downhill skiing. And where do you go to do that if you live in southern Kansas? You go to Colorado. So I've been driving back and forth up and down Colorado through the Front Range, Pueblo, Springs, Denver, and that type area. And especially down Highway 400 from like Syracuse to Pueblo. And watching like little towns shrink, the kind of medium-sized towns, like they get Dollar Generals, they get a super Walmart.
Yeah.
And the towns next to them shrink. It seems like I remember back like in 95 going down Highway 400, like you could actually, there were actually more stretches of rural, like more stretches without crap on them that you could see. And now it seems like kind of about like once you get to Los Animas, it's just buildings from there all the way to Pueblo now.
Pretty close. There's still a little stretch between Los Animas and La Junta that's kind of classic, like eastern Colorado Prairie. But then, yeah, from like La Junta, and there's always been those little towns. Like there's a lot of little towns between La Junta and Pueblo, but that's the Arkansas River Valley. So there's a lot of produce grown right there, and there always has been. But now, as like La Junta's kind of got bigger, but all those little bitty towns in between La Junta and Pueblo have just like shrank because they're strictly farm and ranch towns, whereas La Junta had like some produce processing. I mean, there was like some industry there, and that's where the sale barns are, and like it was a little bigger town with more going on. But like say Fowler, Manzanola, all those little towns in there, they just got smaller. And yeah, it's weird. But then like Pueblo had this, I mean, when I was growing up, and it's still kind of the case, like Pueblo is the armpit of Colorado. It was a shithole. Kind of like Dodge City, it's bigger than Dodge City, but like Dodge City's always been a shithole. It's got a lot of history behind it, but that was never a nice town.
I would rather go to Dodge City than Garden City. The smell in Dodge City is generally better than Garden City.
Fair enough. Yeah. Garden City doesn't have the storied history of Dodge City though. But like because of all that like Old West lore about Dodge City, which only
Boot Hill and Wider.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of that, like people think it's a nicer town than it is, but no, it's still it's a rough town. Always has been.
It's never been a nice town.
Yeah. Yeah. Never once. And Garden City is, yeah, I don't know. There's parts of Garden City that are, like kind of nice residential neighborhoods, but I still think like, why the hell would you live in Garden City? They're like, it's Kansas, and it's southwest Kansas as it is. So you're not seeing a whole lot different from town to town, but there's a lot of little towns around Garden City that are just a lot nicer to live in.
Yeah, Lakin's a nice place. I go out there every year for
yeah.
I try to go out there every year for a conference in like August. It's called Bottom Line. It's a pretty good one.
Okay. Yeah. Lakin's where both my kids were born.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to circle back. We were talking about Colorado Springs, and there's that area that's kind of like northeast of Colorado Springs, like kind of straight east of the academy. I remember there being absolutely nothing there. Like,
yeah,
nothing. And, then I guess it was about 15 years ago. My sister was stationed there in Colorado Springs for a while at NORAD, and she had a condo, and I'd go out and I'm like, okay, sis, explain to me where we are and how long has this been here? She's like, oh, all this is all brand new, and they're still building up this way. None of this was here when I was in school.
See, that's probably some land that we worked killing prairie dogs. I wouldn't be surprised, because I remember we had a big job over by it was in the Castle Rock area, and so it was like overnight jobs. We did several times, and we'd stay the night in Castle Rock, and that's probably the land that we did was for some developers that it was ranch land that got bought out, and so I wouldn't be surprised if we had been working on that right about that same time.
Now, okay, we're talking about you're talking about dealing with prairie dogs, just trying to get rid of them
Hmm.
so the animal huggers feel better when the bulldozers come and scrape it all up.
Well, actually, we do it more for the bulldozer guys, so they don't have to keep cleaning them up, because those prairie dog, doesn't matter if you bulldoze it over, they'll just dig right back up through it. Because you're not going to kill very many of them with the bulldozer itself. It's because they're smart, they get shot at a lot, so.
And they'll like, even if you destroy their habitat, they'll just come back because that's a good spot and they'll reestablish.
Right. Well, one of the big reasons the ranchers don't like them is because they clip the grass down to where it doesn't grow back, so they can have a better line of sight. That's so the bulldozer just made their job easier for them. I'm not sure what their diet is exactly, but it's not grass. Like they're not eating the grass. They're clipping it down, and it kind of, they can take over a pasture with, it's your horse or cattle can step in a burrow, or even not in a burrow, but like right behind it, and break a leg. So I mean, they're a nuisance for the ranchers, and so they get shot at plenty. And so they're pretty wise to, outside of the young ones, they're pretty wise to humans. And so if you get the big developments like that bulldoze it in, I mean, they'll just dig right back up through it, and they're like, hey, we can see so far now. This is awesome.
Yeah.
So we were poisoning them with it was aluminum phosphide, phostoxin, or I think the stuff we used was called fumitoxin. And there's these little pellets that essentially causes a reaction that sucks all the oxygen out of the den. So we'd put the pills in, and we'd seal it with like a sheet of newspaper, and then we'd use that to mark the ones we'd treated, and then you'd shove the newspaper in, and it kind of helped seal the gas in the hole, and then you'd fill it in, tamp it shut. And that, it was kind of a mind-numbing job, but it was good honest work, and paid well, because turns out people don't like to run a shovel very, very much, even if it pays well.
So I'm going to come at this kind of from a different angle. When people, okay, prairie dogs, yes, there are some bad things that they do in the pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to look at it is they're part of the ecosystem. They've been a part of the ecosystem a lot longer than white people have on this continent.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the fact that their natural predator, the black-footed ferret, we pretty much drove to extinction.
Yeah.
But so my experience with prairie dogs is a little bit different, because, like where I live, I've never had any on the ranch. We've never had any on this ranch. There's several dog towns, a mile or two away. And even like 15 miles south of one of Ted Turner's properties, a Z-Bar. They have done work. Like, they'll go out and establish a frickin' prairie dog town.
Huh.
Just so they can then try to bring in black-footed ferrets and dump in the area and try to establish the black-footed ferrets. Like, people can say what they want about Turner Foundation. Like, I've been watching what they do for 20 years on the ground as their neighbor. I agree with it. Like, I mean, like, okay, it's a lot of money to go spend to establish a prairie dog town. Well, if I had the kind of money to spend, I might do some more habitat restoration stuff like that, but I don't. So I've got to try to do that naturally. Anyway,
have they had any issue with those prairie dogs migrating over into other people's property?
They kind of have like 45,000 acres down there.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we're talking, I mean, this is big ranch country. So one of the ranches that joins the Z-Bar, the Ballot, I think it's 8. Then the Merrill, it's pretty huge. I think it's over 20. The Gregg Ranch is 13, and it kind of touches in there. Then the Brass Ranch is about 10, and it touches in there. So, but anyway, I was still talking about prairie dogs. Now, I've never actually done this, but it seems like the way to try to get rid of them in a pasture is try to create more habitat for your predators instead of trying to kill your prairie dogs. And by that, Some things that I've heard people talk about is going out and putting predator blinds for coyotes to kind of hide behind, and putting telephone poles, like kind of in the middle of the dog town or kind of around the outside, but not with a crossbar on it. Because a hawk sitting on top of a telephone pole looks like a pole. A hawk sitting all the way out on the side of a crossbar on a telephone pole looks like a hawk sitting on a crossbar. So I'm really wondering if creating some predator habitat around dog towns will actually help them shrink, or if really the go-to still needs to be, chemicals and toxins.
Yeah.
Look, there's a reason these tools are in the toolbox, but I don't think that, me personally, I don't think that a toxic tool is going to be the first one that I'm going to want to try to go to. Something like that's going to be kind of a little bit farther down the line, for my purposes.
Yeah. That's a fair assessment. I don't know. Because I don't know much about the black-footed ferret, because it's, like you said, it's been pretty much gone for a while. So I don't know what the relationship to cattle and horses is with the ferret as opposed to the prairie dog. If they're still tearing up the ground like a prairie dog, I'm not sure. I don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment, though. Because my gut reaction is say, "Shut up, hippie. We'll just kill them all." Yeah, so the old timers did it. But I mean, because they are a nuisance, and I would imagine back where you're at, the grass is about knee high when the grass really comes in.
Yeah, knee to waist, and
Okay, so
like knee to waist high for most of it. Like, and the tops, the stems for the big blue and the Indian grass, they'll be 6,
yeah,
7.
so you got big grass out there, whereas where I grew up out on the short grass prairie, so it's a way more suitable environment for the prairie dog because of the short grass. It's easier for them to knock it down and have a better line of sight, so they better survivability out that neck of the woods. So
Something else I think might also work. Like, I don't see prairie dogs where people have small pastures that rotate often.
yeah,
And that's just kind of observationally. So what if we take our prairie dog town and go like 10 yards outside where they've got it short, and just string a hot wire around it, keep the cows out?
yeah,
What if we do that? Because without the cattle helping the prairie dogs keep all that grass short, because we know cows want to come back and eat that fresh growth. Same reason the prairie dogs are, because it's the highest in nutrition. If we lock them out of there and let that grass have a chance to rest, or just be impacted by just the prairie dogs and not the cattle, that should allow the grass to start coming back. And maybe over time, the tall grass starts to encroach on the dog town, and the dog town starts to shrink.
yeah. Maybe. I think controlling the population of the prairie dog town helps a lot. I mean, there's a lot of ranchers with big towns have figured out. I mean, it's kind of like the Texas hunting scene, where everybody with a decent sized spread has high fence and some exotic animals and stuff. And guys out on the plains make a pretty decent chunk of change. Setting up outfitting services for guys just to shoot prairie dogs from long range. And I won't mention any names, but I know some guys that do that, and it seems wild because that was an old favorite pastime growing up. Was when I was in like middle school, high school, is call my buddy and we'd take the 22s out and just go plink prairie dogs for a while.
Get a box of 50 rounds for 17 cents.
Oh, it was so nice. It was so nice. Those George W. years on guns and ammo, like looking back at it now, man, I could have bought so many more guns during that time if I would have just had a little bit of foresight.
My investment strategy for a long time has been in forged aluminum, brass, copper, steel, lead, gunpowder.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed Cora Blund on my show, Burning Daylight, here a while back, and he was talking about reading a article on Guns and Ammo and talking about when if shit ever really hits the fan, uh, ammunition would be a way better currency than even gold because it has a use. And so, you go get a breakfast of bacon and eggs and you pay with a couple of rounds of 9mm. And it makes a lot of sense if you look in that kind of post-apocalyptic sense where it's probably you're not going to be getting bacon and eggs. You're going to be trading a couple gallons of water here and there.
Something else that's going to be really useful when the apocalypse happens or supply chains completely shut down. Screws and nails.
Yeah. A lot of stuff, a lot of perishable goods too, or like coffee and liquor is going to be in high demand, and it'll be worth a lot.
That's probably what I'm going to have the hardest time with. Not the liquor part, the coffee part.
Yeah.
Like,
I've got
you
a
take
lot
away
of,
my coffee in the morning. It's not a good scene.
I have a little subscription through Black Rifle Coffee, and I get the same amount order or delivered every 2 weeks. And in the summer, like my coffee consumption goes down pretty considerably just because of the heat. I'm not an iced coffee fan.
No.
Like I don't mind those like the ready to drink stuff that you buy out of the cooler every now and then if I'm on a road trip, but I like hot coffee, and so I always like build up a huge supply in the summer, and then it dwindles down a little bit in the winter. But I keep thinking I should I thought initially I was like I should cut back in the summer and just instead of getting 4 bags delivered, get 3 bags delivered. And then I'm like, no. If there's ever any supply chain hiccup, I at least have a back supply.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'm getting ready to crack into a bag of Kona coffee that my buddy hand carried from Hawaii on the airplane. He only brought me
Kona
a half.
coffee is amazing.
Oh, so and we're pretty serious. We grind our own beans every morning. Not quite as serious to like measure water out to the gram.
Oh, that's where I'm at. I'm a fucking nerd when it comes to that, and it makes a difference. I use a Chemex and do the pour over stuff, and it makes a better cup of coffee for sure. It takes some time. It's a lot more work than your typical drip coffee, but it makes a better cup of coffee.
I cashed in about 4 years worth of credit card points. I got a really, really sweet Breville coffee maker and
nice
Breville grinder. I mean, that thing makes an 8-cup pot. Like, oh, so good.
Yeah.
The 12, when you put the big filter in for the 12, it's not quite as good. But so we usually make an 8-cup pot in the summertime because that's a cup for me, cup for her, or maybe a little left over. In the winter, we got to make the 12, and sometimes we end up making 2 12s.
Yeah. We've just recently, I think within the last year, I started using the Chemex pour over stuff, and I got the big 10-cup deal, and I had it dialed in for the winter. For I usually have like a single cup at the house before I head to work, and then I take one of these, but it's like a 30 ounce or whatever, and I had that measured out. Now I've switched to this 20 something ouncer, and so like I'm still getting the weights dialed in that I have to make every morning. But I say it is a way more of a process than even your regular your old Mr. Coffee. But it I don't know. Once you drink good coffee, it's kind of hard to go back to that shitty Folgers that you got to put salt in to cut the bitterness,
Well, we normally drink a brand called Don Pablo. Like they come out of Florida, they source their beans, and don't get me wrong, I like Black Rifle. Like I like Black Rifle as a company. I like Black Rifle coffee. It's twice as expensive as Don Pablo.
Oh, okay.
and we were on a subscription, and Don Pablo is pretty cool. Like, you ask him, like, hey, how do you feel about giving back to your farmers and making sure farmers are taking care of their land and getting paid a fair wage? And they're like, hey guys, that's where we're at. That's a huge priority for us, is making sure that the farmers we're working with right now will still be able to grow for us in 20 years because they do things right. They take care of their soil and they take care of their trees. I'm like,
That's cool.
Here's my credit card, sir. Just send me some coffee, please.
Yeah.
And the other brand we've been drinking, I mean, just for the last couple of months, was some stuff we picked up in Hawaii at Green World Coffee Farm, where they grow the coffee right there. Like, you could walk out of the coffee shop, past the roaster, into the coffee grove where there's coffee trees.
Huh.
Like,
interesting. I've never been on any sort of coffee operation, so that'd be interesting to take a look at.
So, and it's related to, like, we can look at the coffee industry and coffee supply chains. We can look at beef industry, beef supply chains, and they're kind of the same. And, so this is Ranching Reboot. One of the things that I like to say is shake the hand that feeds you.
Mm-hmm.
And, we've talked a little bit about, what do we do when the world ends? Having short supply chains, knowing where your stuff comes from. I think that's becoming so much more important. And that's one of the huge lessons that we all should have been paying attention to over the last 4 years of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Supply chain, supply chain, supply chain. Where's your food coming from? How many steps does it go through before it gets to you?
Yeah.
And, I don't want to say anything bad about Black Rifle. I don't want to throw any shade at them. I just like drinking Don Pablo. Tastes good. But they're committed to work with their farmers. They're committed to work with farmers that are caring for their soil for the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd really like to see that spread more across agriculture. And, we saw it with the whole fair trade coffee movement that Starbucks kind of really kicked off. What was that, like 20 years ago?
Something like that, yeah.
I mean, you remember when Starbucks came out? It's like $5 for a cup of coffee? Are you insane? I'll just go buy a box of Folgers for $4.
Mm-hmm.
And, now we're all buying $30 and $40 pounds of coffee for Black Rifle and Don Pablo and all these other good brands.
$7 Starbucks is the standard. I mean, that's base. It's literally basic now. Is however much a Starbucks costs now, but that used to be insane, and now it's just the standard basic white girl stuff.
Well, I bet you remember this too, going to the coffee shop with all the old cowboys and spending 50 cents for a cup of coffee.
Mm.
I mean,
yeah, you'd have like 10 people walk in there, and the entire bill would be like $2.20.
Yep. I wrote down coffee road trip, and I have no idea what the hell that means now.
I would like to see, because there's not a lot of coffee grown in the U.S. That's part of the reason the fair trade stuff came up, because there's just not many, like Hawaii. I don't know if Florida is how much coffee is able to be grown down there, but most of it's grown over foreign.
I think it's got to be pretty tropical. I think there's maybe a small area in Texas and maybe a small area in Florida where coffee can be grown, but it's maybe not quite economical because of the weather's just not right, and there's a disease or an environmental pressure that makes it kind of uneconomical.
Yeah. I had Evan Hafer from Black Rifle on the show one time, and I was asking him about, because I was really interested in like the customs process of that, because I know anything agriculture related is very heavily scrutinized coming into the U.S. And I figured there was a lot of shade, because with any of the customs, particularly you go south of the border, you're not only dealing with the different governments there, but more than likely you're dealing with cartel guys that work for the government as a cover.
Oh, there's no corruption,
none whatsoever. Like I'm at the point now where, rather than bombing the cartels, like we need to like just have a sit down with the heads and be like, hey, how's this gonna work? We need to we need to calm the fuck down over here. Like, both sides, like how we need to, if you guys are the ones that are actually in charge, let's start dealing with you directly and fuck this puppet government nonsense. Like, just declare yourself the leader of Mexico now, and we'll deal directly with you rather than these cutouts. You know, let's get rid of the middleman. And it seems like that's kind of all of these from Mexico and south. Like, that's all their governments are anymore. Is just they're like spokesmen for the cartel.
I can see that. I can definitely see that, how, you know, there's areas that a cartel will control that's not necessarily defined by the political borders on a map that the government in Mexico City recognizes,
Right.
but that power is real.
Yeah.
Just
But,
like,
I mean, they arrested one of El Chapo's family members. I don't remember if it was his son or his nephew or something, but the cartel showed up and stood the Mexican military down and said, let him go. And they did. And you're just like, oh,
they're
okay,
probably
so
better armed.
yeah. So you're like, who's actually in charge down there? That seems like these people that are not the government are actually in charge of what. Why don't we deal with them if they're the ones actually making the decisions?
It's a good point, because, well, it's because our legitimate government can't talk to their criminals
Right.
with
They
any
don't
sort.
negotiate with
Yeah.
terrorists. Yeah. It's interesting. But so, like, I was asking him about any sort of the corruption there, like custom between getting it from the farmer to the roaster here in the US. And he had nothing bad to say about the farmers. He said the farmers are great, hardworking people, didn't have much problem. He's like, the real shady shit happens when you get into finance. He's like, that's where all the real criminals are. And that seems to have rung so true over the past several years. I mean, like, I've been losing trust in the government for quite some time. I was you said you were in the Navy?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did you get from the middle of, you know, the country, like just about, because you're not far from where I grew up. Well, that's about as far as you can get from a large body of water and in the US. How did you get on a ship?
Well, it's a pretty simple story. I walked to the recruiter's office one day and said, I want to join the Navy. And they said, okay, sign here, press hard, 6 copies. I did that. Then some other time, they put me on an airplane, sent me to Chicago. I did a couple months there. And then they said, hey, here's a stack of orders, drive to Norfolk and get on a boat. So, I mean, I guess it really wasn't that hard.
Well, no, I was gonna go into the Marines right after college, and I'd cut my eye when I was funny enough. I cut my eyeball when I was 9 playing Army Man, and that was the reason I was not ever to become an Army Man.
That you're wanting to know more of the why, not the how. Okay. I was it was my senior year in high school, and I was in boarding school. Like, huge long story as to why I was there. And couple of the men that I had as mentors in my life, one was Army National Guard, and we spent quite a bit of time talking. And I started to investigate that. Like, and I even got as far as talking to the recruiter and what jobs. And then it got down to, okay, well, if I join the Guard, where am I going to go? He's like, well, it's a short list of jobs and there's a short list of places and blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I want to expand my options a little bit. So I went and talked to other recruiters. So I went and talked to the Army, and they said, yep, a lot of cool stuff you can do in the Army, but we won't promise you a school. I'm like, okay, that's nice. Then next door was the Marine Corps. And
That was where I was going.
I walked in there. So what do you guys do? And they say, we get shot at. And I said, okay. And I turned around and walked out. Then the Air Force was next. And my sister at the time was in the Air Force Academy. I'm not going to go enlist in the Air Force while my sister's an officer and have to be stationed on the same base and salute her all the time.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. So I just walked past the Air Force. All that was left was the Navy. Walked to the Navy's office. I said, you guys guarantee a job? And they said, yep. And I said, cool. What you got?
Nice. So what was your What was your specialization as a Navy man?
I was a machinist mate, which has absolutely nothing to do with operating machine tools like mills and lathes, like you'd think a machinist might do.
Yeah.
I learned how to work on uh, steam turbines, both for main propulsion, electrical generation, pumps, pipes, valves,
Okay.
main reduction gears, boilers. That's what I learned in school. And then I got to my first ship, USS Enterprise, and they assigned me to engineering auxiliaries, which I did absolutely nothing of what I learned for the previous 3 months in school. We worked on deck
Good old
machinery.
U.S. military.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. Mostly my shop worked on things like deck machinery, so like winches, windlasses, for underway replenishment. Like when you get two ships next to each other, you throw a bunch of lines over, run a fuel line over, and it's pretty cool. I bet there's stuff on YouTube for it. But like all those winches, sliding pad eyes, there was a crane we had. But the important gear that my shop owned, we owned the after steering gear. So we owned the rudders and the machinery to turn them. And we owned the anchor windlass all the way at the other end of the boat. And we owned all 4 aircraft elevators and all their shit. So we were everywhere. I mean, we were everywhere from way below the waterline all the way to flight deck, stem to stern. My shop had gear everywhere. Did that for like 3.5 years, did 2 combat deployments. I got off.
In the Mediterranean or where?
Yeah, Mediterranean. So I did 1 full cruise on the Enterprise, did half of another cruise. I flew off in June of 2001. I was on temporary duty in Norfolk when 9/11 happened.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So I re-enlisted, went to a destroyer as a gas turbine systems mechanic, which like the schooling for gas turbine mechanic and machinist mate, like the first 8 weeks are all the same. It's just the last part is a little bit different. So it's back to pumps, pipes, valves, air compressors, things like that. But instead of having a steam turbine, it's a gas turbine.
Okay.
Right? So you just learn how a gas turbine works, which, that was kind of easy for me. And it was just a lot of the same stuff. It was just kind of like there was a major chunk that was just taken out and replaced with something that was extremely similar. Did a deployment on the destroyer, which going from an aircraft carrier where you've got like roughly 5,000 people with you on deployment to a destroyer where you've got about 330 people on deployment. Small difference in culture.
I imagine. I've heard that when a carrier docks at port, particularly like in the Middle East, they'll eat the entire port out of bacon within, 24 hours.
Beer.
That too. That too. I mean, that part's obvious. But I was.
There are places where we went where, I mean, we'd go for 3 days and it's like, we have to go because the locals are out of food now. It's time to leave.
Just the massive amount of men that are on an aircraft carrier. So a destroyer. So this is the part that being a landlubber, if you will, like I'm a flatlander through and through. Like we didn't have water, we didn't have trees where I grew up. So I've come to learn that like the real power of the U.S. military is the Navy, the deep water Navy. That's always been like that's been the calling card of like all the great, Enlightenment era and beyond empires, like particularly the British navies. They had the best deep water Navy in the world, and now that's what we have. So what is the task or the purpose of a destroyer? What is your job?
Oh, that's a good question. I have no idea. I was just the guy that kept the engines running. Like I'll just pump some fuel, keep the engines running, keep the lights on. What does a destroyer do? A lot of times, you're operating with a larger ship as part of a defensive screen, whether you're whether you're doing anti-submarine warfare tasking or, you're doing air surveillance tasking or what. There's a lot of destroyers are pretty much a multi-mission ship.
Okay.
That deployment that I did, we did a lot of steaming. Now we're going back like 20 years, Matt. Okay.
Yeah.
I can't remember the carrier, but there were a lot of times we were steaming with the carrier, but you couldn't see him. I mean, you
Okay.
got a formation that's 30, 40 miles across that you're in. The carrier's in the middle, you're on one side, and you never see another boat. You're just kind of maneuvering around. And then we got to go do some solo ops, which that's always fun.
You're like the cavalry of the Navy, kind of.
Kinda. The carrier's the big stick. The destroyers are kind of the quick response.
Okay. So you're like like cavalry or like the Rangers or some like quick action group as opposed to where big army would be, that's the carrier.
Yeah. So we were with the carrier and we were headed towards a Liberty port. Like we were going to Bahrain.
Okay.
And I did 2 cruises on the carrier. When they put out the schedule, that's the schedule. It didn't change. Like,
Yeah.
if there was a change, it's like, okay, we've had to alter the schedule. So in a month and a half, we're not going here, here, and here.
Yeah.
I mean, your schedule is pretty much when they put it out, you knew that's what you were going to do for the next 30 days. If there are Liberty ports on the schedule, that's where you're going. Destroyer, not so much. Like,
Okay.
we were getting ready to pull into a Liberty port, and they called it off. We turned the boat around and had to haul ass to go do another mission.
Interesting.
A little bit different, or a little bit earlier in that cruise, we were headed to Bahrain. And for the next 2 months, we had a pretty good Liberty schedule in the Gulf. It's like, hit a port, you're out for 2 weeks. Hit a port, out for 2 weeks. Hit a port, out for 2 weeks. Like, great, booze cruise in the Gulf. I can handle this.
Yeah.
We were 2 days out from Bahrain. Like, we're 6 hours away from going through the Straits of Hormuz, which is that's a big deal. Constricted choke point. People could be shooting at you from both sides, possibly landmines. We don't know. It's always an interesting time.
That's where the Houthis are active now, right?
Yes. Yeah. Like, you got Arabs on one side and you've got Iranians on the other side, and none of them like each other.
But they don't like us even more.
Depends on the day, I think.
Yeah.
So, like, we're headed to that stretch of water. I was on watch down at Central Control, and where I'd sit for watch for 4 to 6 hours a day. It's basically, I had this huge console full of buttons and screens, and I had throttles. I was monitoring the main engines and fuel pumps, reduction gears, oil systems, all that stuff, just kind of doing the high level monitoring. Like, we're just sitting there cruising along at 12 knots on one engine. Phone rings, bridge calls down. We need to go to full power and answer flank bell immediately. Okay, roger that. EL hangs up the phone, starts yelling orders at me. We start bringing engines up. Boat comes around 180 degrees, and we go from 12 knots on one engine to 32 knots on all 4. And it's kind of impressive when all 4 of those big turbine engines spool up and start sucking down like 2,000 gallons of fuel an hour. Oof. The boat comes up, starts to ride a little bit funny, kind of get on plane, ride on the props, everything shakes. And we stayed on that flank bell for 3 days. And we went to a box off the coast of Yemen, and we stayed there for 58 days. Like, this box was like 5 miles by 12 miles. And we were there for 58 days.
Wow.
Doing a terrorist, trying to do some kind of terrorist maritime interdiction. Like, there was one boat that we were trying to hunt.
But you stayed in this little square.
Yeah, and it was pretty ridiculous because every morning, we'd go up on the harpoon deck. That's where my shop did its morning muster. We go up on the harpoon deck, and after about the first week, I guess they thought it was a joke on the bridge to try to be in the same spot on the same heading at the same time every day. So everybody had to look at the same shit. It's like Groundhog Day. The only thing different was the clouds, and most times there weren't any.
That's funny. That's kind of how cowboying is. A lot of, like it's this romantic lifestyle, but it's kind of the same shit every day. Like you never hear stories about the average day in the saddle because nothing really happens. You trot circles or ride pins or whatever, but the cool stories always come when shit goes wrong, and that's if you're on a decent outfit, it doesn't happen very very often. So it makes it more memorable.
Incredibly long periods of soul crushing boredom,
Hmm.
punctuated by extremely short moments of intense excitement.
Yeah, this is why I relate so well with military guys. Like I wanted to be a military guy growing up, and then I went into the cowboy profession, and it's a lot of the same mentality. It's just like, it's a dangerous job. You knew that going into it, so like the danger part doesn't really even register. You're just like, unless it's like you're like, oh, I don't know if I do that. Um, but more often than not, you're like, that could suck, but let's give it a whirl. And then you don't quit until shit's done. Like you don't leave early. You leave when it's done. And then yeah, like you said, they're just hours after hours of boredom. And then yeah, real like shit switches on real quick, and then just like that, it's over.
There's two noises that will instantly get my heart rate to about 140. Rapid ringing of a bell,
Mm,
followed by somebody saying fire, fire, fire.
yeah.
Like loud, rapid ringing of a bell, fire, fire, fire. My heart rate's 140, and you have all of my attention right now. The
Yeah.
other one is the general quarters gong.
Yeah.
Bong, 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 general quarters, general quarters. Like I have been out of the military since 2006. I've been out for almost 18 years. And when I hear that gong, 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 general quarters, heart rate's up, the rest of the world falls away, and it's like, okay, where do I need to go?
Yeah.
Who are we fighting? Like, what's the deal here? And to kind of tag into the comment that you're talking about, there's some parallels between military life and cowboy, and I can kind of see some of those. So Saturday, one of my clients came up. We were dragging calves. Now, Tim is a really good friend of mine. Won't mind I mention his name. One of the reasons I love this guy is he brings up his 3 kids and a bunch of other kids, and we're
Yeah.
like 10 to 16.
Nice.
And that's what we need.
Yep.
I work with guys where we'll go do a rope and drag at 250 and be done at 10:30 in the morning. Start
Hmm.
at 8. Like
Yeah.
fast, efficient crew. I would rather go work with these kids and take till noon to
Yeah.
do 150 than do 300 before 10 a.m. with a fast crew.
Yeah.
So there were 2 young men that Tim had hired out of the college. Like one of them was 18, one of them was 19. They're like, yeah, we've only been doing this 3 days. I'm like, good. Here's what you do. If you got time to lean, you got time to clean. If you're standing around and there are other people working, ask yourself why you're standing around, because we're all getting paid the same and we're all here till the job's done.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if it takes 6 hours or if it takes 12. We're all getting
Yep.
paid the same. If there's work to be done, pedal ass, get to doing it.
Yep. There's something about that with like particularly day help type of guys that like strictly just day work. They don't work for anybody in particular, but they kind of help everybody.
Yep.
And I did that for a while, and you get paid by the day typically. And you get in a mindset just like, all right, well, you jump in and help finish up because if you only work till noon, you're still getting paid the whole day. I mean, that's 2 or 3 more colts you can go ride uh when you get home, something like that. And so like you learn how to jump in. You learn how to teach people to be efficient, and then you also working for a bunch of different people. You learn a whole lot of different ways to skin a cat, if you will.
What's day thug rate out there?
I honestly, I couldn't even tell you. And this is part of like going back to the being a cog in the machine. I'm strictly a feedlot cowboy now. Like I guess I'm technically cattle manager. I have a little more responsibility than just the cattle side of things. But for the most part, I'm strictly a feedlot cowboy. And I'm old enough now. I'm 38 where unless it's a good friend or something kind of cool, I don't do a whole lot of outside help. My kids are getting old enough where I can spend time with them, and maybe here in the near future we'll go out and do some day thugging with certain outfits so I can bring my kids. But for the most part, like I'm gonna get paid for my time. My time, I've realized over the years that your time's your most valuable resource. So if you can, get paid for it.
Well, I asked because I kind of wanted to, have a little bit of discussion. It seems like 2 to 250 is kind of about what day rate is, about what guys around here have settled on for a day rate.
I
And
wouldn't be surprised if that's it around here. And out here, you got to drive considerably further than you would in that neck of the woods. Like, I mean, you were talking about big ranches at 10,000 acres or whatever, and I mean that's
a pasture.
yeah. I mean, when you're on the high desert, I mean you're talking a couple 100,000 acres for some of those big spreads over in like Elko County or over 1 million acres, and like it's a whole different type of big.
I think it's kind of all related to rainfall.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
100%.
it all goes back to rainfall.
Yep. I mean, I've my friend Thaddeus Payton. Thad lives down in Alabama, and he's he's an Alabama cowboy, and sure enough, handy. I've never met him in person, but he was talking about they're like one of their big pastures was like 60, 80 acres, and I'm like, fuck, man, you can't even like that's kind of the hay fields here in the valley areas. But as far as like cattle pastures outside of like your cabin traps or something like that, I mean you're talking huge country when you get out on the desert.
It's like I got a buddy in Georgia. He's like, yeah, I keep 250 cows on 47 acres in Georgia. Like, must be nice to get like 700 inches of rain a year.
Yeah, when I first started talking to Thad, he was asking me about growing up, and like I said, I was in homestead country, so most everything's in quarter and half sections. Like a big cow pasture would be a full section, or 1,000 acres that's a big pasture. But the further west you got into public lands, there you'd have a little bit of like BLM or a Forest Service ground where I grew up, but the further west you got, it opened up quite a bit. And then I moved out to Nevada, and I didn't realize what big country was. I was up in Montana right after college, and it was a big enough range. They ran about somewhere around 3,000 mama cows, and I won't mention the place. I wouldn't say I had a great experience there. Like the work itself was fine. It was cowboy work. I enjoyed that, but I didn't care for the how they ran that ranch. But I was also a young punk coming out of college that knew everything. So, but that was a pretty big place. But then you hear about places and like Eastern Nevada or down in Arizona or even in Texas, and you're just like, yeah, my outfit wasn't anywhere close to that big. Like that's big. And we ran not that many less cows, but it just the grass was so much better up there that
it's
but it was
perspective.
still over 100,000 acres. So I mean it was big enough.
Yeah. Hey man, I got to recycle some coffee. So let's take a quick
All
break.
right, sounds good.
And we're back. I
All right.
I just love coffee too much.
I do too. I've seen a lot of memes lately about, well, particularly that one guy, Mandatory Fun Day. He always talks about military guys being addicted to caffeine and nicotine, and once again, that's kind kind of the same as the cowboy world. Coffee in Copenhagen, and you're good to go.
Pretty much. All right. Let's get into some heavy stuff.
All right.
Man, so much to go through. Okay, let's just start off that feedlots suck. They're dirty.
Mhm.
CAFOs are the reason that animal rights activists have an argument. And regenerative has scale issues. So the
Yes.
question is, how do we build a better food system that's better for the land, better for resource utilization, and better for the consumers?
Well, start off with, I think CAFOs are they're not necessarily all bad. On the hogs and the chicken side of things, and even on the dairy to some extent, I've got my issues with the dairy, but not a ton on the CAFO side. I think on the cattle side of things, particularly feedlots, they're extremely useful. I think the feedlot industry was a kind of a glorious revolution of the cattle business, because it shortened the time down to bring, from conception to a steak on your plate. It like halved that time. And I'm a huge proponent of grain-fed beef. I think it tastes better. I think it overall it's a better quality beef, and you can look back throughout the history of America and you'll see that. I mean, that the Texas cattle boom helped propel the American meat packing industry, and just the American, like, what's the right word, but like the food making capacity of the US, like it exploded with the Texas cattle boom post Civil War. But the high population centers were not that excited about Texas beef because it was tough and stringy. And it wasn't until they started importing better meat quality cattle. But still, your best selling cattle came through like Illinois, Indiana, where they grazed on corn.
Okay. Let's maybe examine what kind of cattle that were coming up out of Texas during that time. Are we talking like 1840 to 1880 time frame?
Yep. And so that was the Texas Longhorn.
Okay.
Which was a tall, well, not necessarily tall, but a lot of them were pretty tall, but they were leggy, hard traveling, tough. But the meat quality was stringy. They were survivor type cattle. I mean, they're like,
well, they were, I mean, the Longhorns come from the Creole genetic group, which is what the Spanish brought over in the 1500s. Very similar to the Corrientes. Like the Corrientes are kind of like the smaller, shorter horn ones, and the Longhorns are, Longhorns were generally 200 pounds heavier and had all the horn.
Yeah. They came from, oh, go ahead.
But the thing about those Creole breeds, and that includes the Piney Woods and Florida Swamp, Florida Crackers. The thing about those cattle is, okay, yeah, the meat quality did kind of suffer. It suffered because they had 400 years of natural selection and adaptation of that genetic pool of animals learning how to live in the Great Plains, the Southern Plains, Texas, and the high deserts. Corrientes as well. Now, because of the lack of influence of human-directed breeding, in nature, the coyotes don't care how tough the meat is. Like, they're going to eat it anyway. It's only when we started, breeding them, that's a thing for us. And yeah, you can fix that a little bit with diet. You can fix that with genetics. But that might also been, I don't know. I'll shut up. The floor is yours, sir. I'll let you.
Well, you're 100% right on that. If you look at the first cattle that came over with the Spaniards, it was is the toughest survived. We see this a lot in the feedlot I'm at now, because we get a lot of Mexican steers in the spring. Like I think we're shipping out the last of our Mexican steers to grass here here next week. But we have this real hot and heavy period every year where we get several thousand head of Mexican steers. And it's funny, just I've been at this outfit about just hit 7 years. And the quality of cattle that I've seen from Mexico in that period has jumped dramatically. And by quality, I mean by meat animals. And because the first couple of years there was a lot of ear, a lot of spots, just in the feedlot business, what we'd call Okies, and like not number one Okies. These were like 2s and 3s, it seemed like. And now you see a lot more Charlet. You see a lot of like red, kind of Salier Red Angus cross, a lot of blacks, and you see they seem more akin to like Kentucky, Alabama, Arkansas cattle that I saw in the feedlots when I was in Kansas. And still some ear, still got a kind of a distinct smell to them, and not your northern breeds where you're seeing like picture book Montana, Angus and Herefords and Charolais, where they're definitely crossbred, but the quality of them has increased pretty dramatically in just like a 5-year window, I would say. But a lot of that has to do with genetics, and all of that is human guided. So the Spanish cattle that came over initially, only the toughest of them survived, because it was like it was like what, 6-month ship ride over.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a long damn ways across the Atlantic Ocean.
And once they got here, there wasn't anybody like giving them alfalfa and growing corn for them either. No,
you didn't have established pastures for them. They just kind of roamed, and that's kind of how the American cowboys started. Like they had herdsmen and whatnot over in Europe and Africa and the Middle East, but they didn't really have cowboys because, being such an older civilization over there, it was well more established. So they had their big pastures and whatnot, but nothing like the New World. And so you get those gauchos and vaqueros of the old Spanish countries. Like it's they learned a lot of stuff in a relatively short period of time, and built this whole culture. And but it was all survival based. It wasn't like you built up an industry as you went, but the early stages, it was kind of like a startup company where you're just, you're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. And then as more people came over, as we established a civilization and a culture over here, while simultaneously wiping out another. That's how conquest works. But the
people we killed and stole it from, they probably killed somebody else and stole it from them.
Right.
We probably killed somebody before that and stole it from them. That's just how the world works.
Right. And I mean, like, if you look at the Israel-Gaza situation, and you can look at the humanitarian stuff and how awful all of it is, but if you zoom out, it's just another war of conquest is what it is. And
but is that whole Gaza situation is so complicated because there's 3,000 years of history in that area, and 3 different religious groups that all claim it as holy ground from different time periods.
Yeah, it's a little more complex than our war of conquest over here, because we threw off the Brits in 1776, but there was, when we first land, like 15 something, the Northern Europeans,
1560, 1570, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you look at that till say 1900 is kind of when the Indian Wars were like completely done and over. you're talking about a damn near 400-year war of conquest, and that's what it was. And you split it up into different time periods, but essentially that was the European colonists conquering this huge landmass, and it took about 400 years to do so. And yeah, and I see Gaza, the Gaza Israel deal, is just like a longer version of that.
It's okay. Thinking about and trying to talk about the whole Gaza and Israel situation. That's almost one of those lightning rod subjects, right?
Yeah.
Because you can start talking and get a little bit ways down, and then your viewpoint comes out, and the person you're talking to is completely opposite for completely different reasons.
Right.
So let's preface this with, my mother is Jewish. Okay. So some of this is like, maybe it's different, like when you're Jewish or have some Jewish heritage and you're kind of looking at what's happened, because I was brought up in the 80s and 90s.
Mhm.
And the Holocaust is something that my mother and her family made sure I knew about, and knew that it happened, and understood that it happened. Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I know it wasn't just Jews during the Holocaust. There were a lot of gypsies and like gays and undesirables, people with like genetic and mental defects that went to the camps too. It wasn't just Jews, but there was a lot of Jews. There were a lot of gypsies too. And so then what we had happen after World War II, and of the persecution in Europe of the Jews, is we said, okay, we're going to create a state for the Jewish people, and we're going to put it right there where they say the Holy Land is. In my mind, and I could be completely wrong, the Jews were there first, then the Christians had a claim to the Holy Land, and then the Muslims showed up 600 years later.
Yeah.
And now we're all fighting about it.
Pretty much.
And okay, so we've got Gaza. There's 1 million people that live on a postage stamp. Yeah, there's some terrorists. Not all people that live in Gaza are terrorists.
Right.
Not all terrorists are Gazan. There's good people there. And for us living in these wide open spaces, 1.2 million people living in basically one of our pastures is just unfathomable. Like, you almost can't conceive of how many people are stacked into such a small freaking area.
Yeah, it's crazy, and there's
a lot of people that have been there for 2 generations that have been told by their family, your homeland was stolen.
Because it kind of was. I mean, depending on who you're talking to, but there is no doubt that when the Israelis or the Jews set up this new state of Israel, they didn't play clean. They didn't play particularly fair. And then they came in and they kicked almost 1 million people off their land, and it was brutal, and it was conquer. It was the Israels came in and conquered that part of then Palestine, or Transjordan, or whatever they were calling it at the time, but the Holy Land. And was that wrong or right? I don't know. I think it's just something people do. I've come to accept that part is just like that war happens. It has never not happened. And
people are always going to kill each other in the name of God.
And the part of all of it is like, where does America fit in on all that? Being that we're thousands of miles away across an ocean. And without a doubt, we are funding, and like, Israel would not be able to do what they're doing right now without our help. That's without a question.
I think we give them billions of dollars of aid every year, and have
$3.8 billion, just like that's a yearly stipend, not to mention all this stuff that we've sent them here since the Gaza stuff is kicked off. And I'm not a fan of the like the overall Arab culture over there. Like it seems a little backward to me, and that might sound racist, Islamophobic, or whatever.
I've
I,
been there, and I agree with you.
I'm just not a fan of it. I have nothing against any individual Muslim, Arab, whatever. I just like that overall culture. If you had to have me choose between what what Hamas wants to institute over there, has instituted over in Gaza versus what Israel is, I'll take Israel 10 times out of 10. And I'm also I did the 23andMe so that like I figured the government had all my shit already, so might as well give them some DNA too. But I've got less than 1% Ashkenazi Jewish blood, more Jewish blood than Senator Elizabeth Warren has Native American blood. I also have more Native American blood than her too. So I'm a real oppressed person, if anybody was wondering. Um, so, but I don't consider myself Jewish. I didn't know many Jews growing up. It's kind of the part of the world I grew up in. Not a lot of black people, almost no Jews. It was white people and Mexican people for the most part, or you had the German Mexicans, which were the Mennonites, which they were literally Germans from Mexico. And that's kind of yeah.
Did they come
Mennonite.
through Mexico by way of Argentina?
No, this was not a Nazi migration. This was like it was religious persecution in Germany. They got kicked out of Germany and they settled in Mexico, and then eventually, like the Mexicans, the native Mexicans or the Spaniard Mexicans, they migrated up through the southern border and set up. So like the Mennonites are they're kind of like Amish light.
Yeah.
And so you have these little colonies of Mennonites all particularly in southwest Kansas. There's quite a few in southeast Colorado as well, but southwest Kansas in particular, there's a lot of Mennonites. But they're German heritage, German genetically, but their ancestors were in Mexico, and so they speak German, Spanish, and English. A lot of them. But that's kind of the world I grew up in. So like Jews and black people, they're like a novelty. It's like, and I don't want to liken them to circus animals, but like it was kind of like if you saw a black person or like say a Hasidic Jew out in the wild, it was kind of like seeing an elephant at the zoo for the first time. You're like, holy shit, look at that! There's a black guy there, and there wasn't anything racist about it. You just didn't know any better like that. You didn't see them except on TV. And so like I was pretty culturally naive until I went to college. But my roommate in the dorms, I lived with him for 3 years, is a Jewish guy. I took some trips back east to New York and did some exploring on the East Coast when I was like junior high, early part of high school, and the family that took us around were like I guess they were culturally Jewish. They weren't necessarily religious Jews, but they were one kind of. I mean, they're one and the same, but not. I guess you could say like everybody's Jewish, but there's like the Judaism side. Like they're all kind of that way. But even the atheist Jews still kind of celebrate the Jewish religious holidays, and I don't know. It's a different culture that I didn't grow up in.
I'd say that, my mother tried to bring me up Jewish, but I didn't live with her for very long and moved back with my dad. That's other stories. I'm aware of the holidays, Jewish holidays. Don't ask me what any of them mean or what any of them are.
Yeah.
I know what Christmas is, Valentine's Day, and, I know what all the Christian holidays are, but, things like Yom Kippur and Passover, I don't know. I know they're important. I don't know why they're important.
Yeah.
But that's not something that's, really celebrated. Back to your comment about like being kind of culturally isolated. There were black people in my life when I was growing up. Going to boot camp was a culture shock.
I bet so. I bet so.
I mean, there was a black man that lived behind my grandfather's house. Now, my grandfather, I didn't know it at the time, but now looking back, things he said and how he talked, the racism is like a giant neon sign.
Yeah.
So the gentleman that lived behind my grandfather's house was Jack Carter. And there was no cream in that coffee.
Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, he was like, I don't think that there was any white blood in that Carter family bloodline, as dark as that man was. Anyway, up until the 80s, the Carter family grew most of the produce and vegetables that were sold in Medicine Lodge right there in town behind my grandpa's house.
Huh.
So then there are several other, black guys that worked in the oil field that I kind of was acquainted with. And it's like, yeah, they're black. So what? They're just people. They do a job. They're here. They're like us. They're just maybe skin color different. You go to the Navy, and out of 88 people that showed up there for boot camp, probably 50% were black people. And it was definitely a culture shock because, I'm going from like rural people that don't really care what your color is, that we're just here, let's just get along, to freaking gang members.
Yeah.
Like maybe some of those guys from the inner city, like Philadelphia, maybe they've seen as few white people as I've seen black people.
Yeah.
And racism, that's a two-way street. I guarantee you that's a two-way street.
Oh, yeah.
Like, why can't we have White History Month? Why can't we have White Entertainment Network television?
Because that's bad. That's racist.
But black entertainment television's not?
Oh, we got to celebrate it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's not hypocritical at all.
No, it's a weird world that we live in, man. And this is a dicey topic too, like anytime a guy with a beard like yourself says white entertainment or then that immediately gets translated to white power, and
you're just a conservative neo-Nazi. All right. Well, thanks for that label. I'm not really conservative. I'm more libertarian than anything.
Well, so it was funny. I've said it many a times on because my buddy Rob, like he was my college roommate, the Jewish guy, and he's like far and away the closest friend I have that's Jewish, and he's also kind of a raging liberal. Didn't used to always be that way, but a guy that I love. Like I was a groomsman in his wedding. He gave a speech at my wedding. He just he's one of my boys, and I tell Jewish jokes all the time because he's one of my boys, and like being in the military, I'm sure like you say the most horrendous shit to the people that mean the most to you, especially on the male side of it. Like that's how you express your love and affection to your boys, is you talk down to them. You rip on them constantly, and so of course then he always calls me an anti-Semite, and we talk shit back and forth. But I always find it funny that like I enjoy conspiracy theories. I don't subscribe to all of them, but I'll entertain just about any one of them. Like I just want to see what's out there. And if you go down a YouTube rabbit hole of conspiracy videos, you don't have to go very far into the comments and somebody will blame the Jews. And so
I think I heard this on Rogan. Maybe it's like every problem is like 6 degrees of Jew. Like it's
like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, except it's 6 degrees of Kevin Kosher.
Yeah, 6 degrees of blaming the Jews.
Yeah. And so like I spend a lot of time by myself on a horse or cruising around in a pickup by myself, and I'm always listening to podcasts because I don't pay attention to like cable news other than clips to make fun of. I try to read most of my news
My wife's gone on a trip to a music festival. She's been gone several days. And just to have a little bit of noise in the house, I turn on the TV.
Yeah.
Something I don't hardly ever do, but since I've had to be here working around the house last few days, I had the TV on when I'm in upstairs, and it's just Fox News.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's not that I care, not that I give a crap about
Background
anything
noise.
Fox. Background noise. It's just background noise. Good God. The coverage of that stupid trial over nothing at all. Just so the Democrats can say, Trump's a convicted felon.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, let's really, really drill down. What is he convicted of? Like, let's talk about this actual crime that is so fucking heinous that he committed that he had to go sit in a courtroom for 8 weeks. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how the Democrats have completely weaponized the entire executive branch of government and are going after their political opponents. You don't think that's a problem? That's not a problem. Hunter Biden's laptop, not a problem. Biden family finances.
A problem than Trump fucking a porn star and paying her to not talk about it, which she did anyways. So, like, if anything,
he should be suing her for breach of contract,
which she actually had to pay his legal fees in a previous lawsuit. But if I were the Democrats, particularly if they wanted to get guys like me to vote against Trump, I'd be talking about what a shitty deal maker he is, because he paid all this money to keep her mouth shut, and then now he's all in all this trouble because she didn't keep her mouth shut. Like, I would be hammering him on that angle.
Okay. I want to challenge you on something you said.
Okay.
You said if the Democrats want to make me vote against Trump. And I think that statement right there, vote against X.
Oh, yeah.
Is kind of I think that's a big problem. And I don't know if you mentioned it or I mentioned it, but I did write down something here earlier about two-party politics and the political system we have in this country. Now, as I've said before, I'm very public about I am libertarian. I'm usually going to vote libertarian. Probably not this year. RFK might get my vote because I refuse to vote against a person. I refuse to vote against an issue. I will vote for something if I support something. And if I cannot support that, I will not vote.
Yeah.
Because voting against, you're not, what are you trying to accomplish if you're voting like, oh, we got to vote for Trump or Biden's going to win. Oh, we got to vote for Biden or Trump's going to win. What the fuck does your candidate have that's so special, and why should I vote for him? Instead of, well, you got to vote for us or the other guy win. That's a weak-ass argument. If your platform can't stand on its own and you can't defend your platform without saying, well, you got to vote for us or America's done if Biden wins again. That's bullshit. Not that I don't agree with it, but you got to tell me why. You got to tell me why I need to vote for your guy, why he's so much better than the other one, not just that we got to vote here or if that guy's going to win. Well, no shit. That's how voting works.
Yeah. See, I'm a libertarian as well. But I'm also, I'm a libertarian in philosophy. I can't stand the Libertarian Party.
I can't vote for Chase Oliver this year. I can tell you that right now.
And I've got a buddy that from Lines of Liberty podcast. He's the communications director for the Libertarian Party. I'm a big fan of Dave Smith and the Mises Caucus.
Yep.
And I think they're doing some good work. But I'm also like, I'm your typical rural person. I'm not going to go protest. I'm part of that I'm not so silent, but like I'm not going to go out and protest. I'm not going to go out and make a bunch of noise about it. But I hold my vote pretty carefully. And I don't buy into this argument for the most part that you're throwing away your vote by voting third party. I don't. I used to really not buy into that, particularly living in Kansas, because Kansas is a perfect place to throw a protest vote, because even if you don't like Trump, which I didn't in 2016, didn't vote for him, I voted Constitution Party. I knew he was probably gonna, like, almost for certain gonna carry Kansas with a big majority. So what's it hurt to vote third party? You know, at least get your get some points on the board for the good guys. You know,
It's showing a voice, even if your candidate's not going to win. It's still showing, hey, there's this many people that support this agenda.
right. And then I moved to Nevada, and Nevada is a dyed-in-the-wool swing state dominated by Las Vegas. 2/3 of the state's population live, might be 75%. It's a huge percentage lives in Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is.
My mom lives there.
And yeah, and it's the state's decided by just a handful of votes. When 2020 rolled around, I didn't want to vote for Trump. I thought his handling of COVID was awful. I thought his foreign policy was starting to, it was better than Obama and Bush for sure. But it's still like he can hang his hat on not starting any new wars all he wants, but he damn sure didn't end any of them either. And so like I wasn't a fan of Trump, but when I looked at it, we had Joe Jorgensen on the Libertarian ticket. Snooze, who cares? Nobody.
They should have put that one the other way. Should have put Spike on the top.
I think so. I would have been more likely to vote for him at that point. But it was just like, this isn't going to move the needle at all. And you know, I don't like voting for a person. I like voting for a set of principles. And she was definitely principled, but well, I wouldn't say definitely. And certain things she was very principled. She had a lot better views than most of the other candidates. However, nobody was ever going to hear him. They were never going to take place, and I knew that. And so it was like, all right, so I'm in a state that matters when it comes to the presidential election. I don't like this guy Trump. I don't like what he's done, but he's clearly better than the alternative, mostly because he can finish a sentence. Even though his policies on COVID have been not good, his gut instincts about the actual thing seem to be in the right place, minus the whole vaccine thing, which he still hangs his hat on, though, which I don't know if that's a political ploy or if that's just Trump not being able to take an L.
It's all I mean, it's all bullshit politics, I think.
I think so, too. I think he knows that there's and we found out during COVID, there's a significant part of the population, if not an outright majority, of people that will just do as they're told.
It's a scary percentage. Scary percentage.
And I don't think it's a majority that are not able to admit they're wrong, but it's a non-insignificant amount of people that just like my buddy Rob's one of those people. Like he'll still spout the line about Trump telling you to drink bleach, which was not true at all. But he still holds on to like the Steele dossier, the
one that Hillary paid for that was completely fabricated.
And she paid like I said somewhere it was a $200 fine. I thought either way it was a fine less than $10,000, I think, that she had to pay for that.
And because she paid that fine, she can't be prosecuted for that anymore. That's how it works. That's how this shit all works.
They changed the law in New York. So what he was convicted of was covering up a business or lying about a business transaction related to campaign finance, which campaign finance was a federal crime that he was not charged with, let alone convicted of. But the judge allowed them to say that, oh yeah, he was definitely guilty of this and this and this. So therefore, all these documents say that he is now guilty of what is a felony now in New York, which they just changed the law kind of almost just for him.
Imagine
and they
that.
escalated it to a felony because if they would have tried him with a misdemeanor, the statute of limitations was already gone. Yeah. And
it seems like they did something else like a couple of years ago when they redefined what a vaccine was. Yeah. So let's just
also
change the definition.
anti-vax too.
Yeah, let's just change the definition of a word, or we'll just change the law so we can go after our political opponents.
They changed the definition of herd immunity. They changed the definition of anti-vaccine to somebody who is actually anti-vaccine plus people who are anti-vaccine mandate.
Yeah, like
Which I'm not anti-vaccine at all. I work in the feedlot industry. We give vaccines for a reason because they fucking work. This other one, initially I was just like, no, I'm looking at what the COVID data says, and it shows that like I'm not really in a high risk category. I'm probably going to be okay. I wasn't in the best shape at the time, but I was in better shape than I would say probably 80% of America.
Yeah.
And that's not a high bar. It's not a high bar.
When you're told to isolate, it's like, okay, let me read through what that means. Oh, my life doesn't change at all. I still go to work. I still like none of that shit changed. I'm already isolated.
Yeah.
And when I go to town, people are like, you need to wear a mask. I'm like, I'm a lot more danger of getting sick from you than you are getting sick from me because I haven't been to town in a month.
Right. And then the narrative about vaccines changed about how they work, because initially it was to protect yourself, which is what a vaccine does. It inoculates you against the disease. And your traditional vaccine has a portion of the disease that it's protecting against. So smallpox vaccine, is there a smallpox vaccine? I think there is, isn't there?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they take
like a dead virus.
Yeah, either a dead virus, or they take what they call a modified live, which is a dumbed down version of that virus. They inject you with it, and it causes your body to fight against it. And because it's such a low amount, your body, a healthy person's body, is able to react to that quickly, and because of that, your body learns. And it builds up these antibodies. So should you get it in the future, you're better able to combat that. It protects you. It doesn't protect anybody else. It protects you. And then we had the pandemic of the unvaccinated, and they're like, oh, we got to get everybody vaccinated to keep, protect the vaccinated people from the unvaccinated. Well,
that's not how vaccines work.
If your vaccine works, why do you have to protect against people that don't have it? It shouldn't make any difference at all. If you've got it and it works, then you're good. You're protected from, as they like to say, severe illness and death. Okay.
And then right after that, they said that then they changed the definition of natural immunity. And they said natural immunity doesn't work for COVID. That was when I knew they were lying to us.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, I probably knew before that, but that's like, after that, there's no going back. We know you're lying to us. We know you're bullshitting us now. And we know this is just for profit.
Yeah. I remember when they had that anti-lockdown protest at the Michigan State Capitol, and they came after the protesters as wanting to kill innocent people because they didn't care about public health and blah, blah, blah. And then came the George Floyd riots. Yep. And all of a sudden, that was no big deal. They encouraged people to go riot. Our current vice president donated money to a bail fund for people that got arrested for burning cities down. And that was A-okay.
Yep, that was fine. That was fine.
But going to church was not allowed. Like here in Nevada, they got sued, and it took them, I think, 3 tries at the Supreme Court before the Supreme Court finally ruled that the First Amendment is a thing. But they had more restrictions and shutdowns on churches than they did in casinos here in Nevada.
Casinos pay tax.
Casinos
churches don't.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what it was. But yeah, it was.
I mean, why shut down all the mom and pop hardware stores?
Why shut down all the open?
Keep Home Depot open because we own shares at Home Depot and Lowe's.
Mm-hmm. Walmart. Yep. Exactly right. It's it was the biggest transfer of wealth in world history, pretty much.
And not just that, but also wealth destruction because of all the money that has been printed in the last 4 years. Isn't it something wild? Like 80% of the money,
I think
80% of the money supply has been invented in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So that I don't want to say this. I mean, dude, I could talk to you all day, but it rained a shitload last night. I got to get to the ranch and work on some fence. Find that note. So one of the problems is when we have these long supply chains, God damn it, that's the wrong note. Labor cost multiply food cost.
Yeah.
The more concentrated, more vertically integrated things are, I don't care. We're not just talking about beef. We're talking about strawberries. We're talking about edible dry beans and coconuts. Okay.
Tuna.
Good example. Anything that requires people to touch it, to process it, package it in order to get it from raw product to saleable food commodity. What else has happened since 2020? We've raised the minimum wage.
Yep.
A lot.
A ton.
Okay. So, well, we got to raise the minimum wage to combat inflation because we increased all this money supply. Well, you understand that when you raise the minimum wage, that has more of an effect on food prices than anything else.
Yep.
And when food price goes up, it hurts the low income earners more than anybody else, the people that are already on minimum wage. Okay.
Right.
So like we keep pushing this button and keep raising minimum wage to raise a standard of living for fucking people that work at McDonald's. I'm sorry, that's a starter job. McDonald's is not a career.
Yep.
Okay. You should get a starting wage there. Learn skills and move on. Working at McDonald's for 20 years is not a career unless you own the building.
Yep.
Like same with all other fast food. Like when I go into a restaurant and I see somebody in their 30s that's waiting tables, I have questions.
Right.
I have questions. So, like some other things that we've kind of like kicked around, like that I know you've talked about, that I've talked about, child labor in a meat packing, to clean meat packing plants. We've got, foreign immigrant labor working in meat packing plants. You know it, and I know it. Why do we have foreign immigrants working in our meat packing plant? It's because that work is hard and shitty. And most of the people in this country don't want to do it for any amount of money. It wouldn't matter if it's $50 an hour to cut meat. There's a lot of people that wouldn't go stand in the factory and do it. You show them a small butcher shop with 10 guys working in it, small processing plant. Yeah, they might go cut cows for $10 an hour.
Right.
But when they're whizzing by at $6,000 a day,
yeah, it's
nobody wants to do that.
No, and then with the minimum wage increases, it incentivizes these giant conglomerates to import all this foreign labor because, and especially if they get them on like I forget what for the sheep herders in particular use them for like Peruvians and whatnot. I forget that visa. Yeah. Used to, they could get them like pennies on the dollar compared to even paying a high school kid to come out and work.
Yeah.
And well, then that just leads to nothing good because, the cartels make a I don't know about a vast majority, but they make a boatload of money off of drugs. But that human trafficking is a real thing and people don't like to talk about that. But I've talked about the child, 14-year-old girl that got injured cleaning a packing plant. I believe she was an illegal immigrant, probably no fault of her own, but like, do we know where she came from? Do we know where her parents were? Why is, and then of course I think it was a JBS plant. JBS claims no culpability because they were contractors. They didn't.
Oh yeah. We just hired a contractor. We have no responsibility for them.
No responsibility. And you're like, how many times, like that girl get smuggled across by a coyote? Did she get raped on the way up here? Is her wages getting funneled directly back to the contractor? Because that's how a lot of that shit works. If you look at like a in the dairy industry. There was a guy in Syracuse, Kansas, Q Fulmer, and I can say this because it's public record. He's been sued and prosecuted before, but he was essentially running the company store with these like, I think it was like Honduran and Guatemalan immigrants in particular, but they'd come up on a visa or whatever, and he'd give them a house to live in, came directly out of their paycheck, give them a pickup to drive, came directly out of their paycheck. And by the time it was all done, they didn't have a whole lot of money. It was just like the old coal mine days of, sold my soul to the company store.
There is a guy in this community, I'm not going to name names, but anybody that lives here knows exactly who I'm talking about, that does the same thing. Instead of doing it with immigrants, he does it with people coming out of the Oklahoma work release program and the Oklahoma prison system.
Oh yeah, so I was on a jury here earlier this year, and I don't know for sure if this was what was happening, but it's kind of the vibe I got. So it was an assault with a deadly weapon was the charge, resulting in serious bodily harm. So this old man has a fishing charter and like a landscaping business. Hired this homeless dude. I don't know if the guy had been previously locked up or not, but I'm guessing so. But just a kind of a vagrant, hired him to do some tractor work for him, and they got into like a heated argument at one point, and then smoothed things over. The old man let this, and they were both old. I mean, the old man was 70 something. The bum was like 65 or so, 67, something like that. They're both kind of elderly. And but he'd let the bum stay at his house, and I'm sure taking it out of his paycheck, because one of the complaints against the old man was not being paid on time or whatever. And it just seemed, I don't think they'll, anyway, the bum ended up hitting this old man with a tow chain and pled self-defense on it. We ended up voting not guilty because the state didn't prove their case at all. And I don't think the guy truly acted in self-defense. However, I don't think this guy was hiring the bum out of the goodness of his heart. I think it was a cheap labor company store type of situation. I don't know that for certain. That's just my feelings. And just like, you also have to realize that there are shitty people out there too. Just like not very, very good or highly unethical people. And that, it seems like those type of people have all the money.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's wild. But yeah, I guess my final thoughts on the whole ag industry in general is I love this line of work. I think it's noble. I think it's good. You produce a product, you produce something physical, it's tangible. You pour your heart and soul into it, and you see results of it. The whole industry is it's in a bad spot. Supply chains are overextended. Everything's too centralized, and the people that have all these highly centralized locations, they also have all the money, therefore all the power. And they didn't just get there by greed. That played a big part of it, but the American rancher, the American people helped them along the way. We keep electing the same people. Nobody really said no when a Walmart popped up or wanted to pop up in a small town or a Dollar General. They're just like, oh yeah, cheaper stuff.
Well, hell, I don't think until a year or two ago, maybe 5 tops, we really realized how much damage Dollar General and Walmart did to Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we saw it with Walmart back in the 90s, but Main Street started to recover for a while, and then the damn Dollar Generals moved in.
Yeah. Well, if you look at like one of the big gripes that that the American rancher has is against the beef checkoff program and how they're, it's a tax. It's a $1 a head tax minimum on every time your animal changes hands, ownership wise. And the producers pushed for it back in the day. Well, now, I mean, it's kind of like, well, we don't like it now because it's not working for us. But like, did nobody have the insight to think maybe this was a bad idea at the time?
That's a good question. I'll have to, next time I talk to Calicrate, because he's one of the few guys I know that was in the industry.
I'd like to talk to that guy. I've listened. I think I listened to him on your show, and then I listened to him on another show before, and I like what that guy has to say.
Yeah, I'll put you two guys in touch for sure.
Awesome.
I mean,
that'd be great.
I love Mike. I appreciate his mind. I appreciate his history. I don't always see eye to eye with him, but I always appreciate his perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. He, I'm sure there's plenty I disagree with him on, but I enjoyed listening to him, and I think he's got a lot of wisdom. And that's one, like I've got to the age now, I'm 38. And, like I've got to the point where like my dad values my opinion on cattle more than he does his own. And so like, all right, I've kind of made it to a level where I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, and
That's
I can
a good
criticize
feeling, isn't it?
It is. And I'm at the point where like I can validly criticize the older generation while still having respect for what they did. Like I criticize boomers a lot. I think overall they're not a great generation. They did a lot of cool stuff, and I there's a lot of boomers that I respect and admire and I hold dear. But as a whole, I'm just I'm not all that impressed with how they left us, and because it's got to feel like when you're trying to build something here and you're at our stage in life, it's got to feel a lot like every new president, when they take office, they're like, holy shit, what did you leave me? This is a mess.
Hey, it seems like it's just nobody deals with the mess. We'll just find a hole to dump it in and make it someone else's problem. At least we'll kick that can past the next election cycle.
I know. Now we're at the point in rural America where things are a mess from farm to ranch, and some of the kids know it. They don't want to inherit that mess, or they just don't want to do that particular line of work. They leave rural America a lot of times, never to come back. And then you have the older generation, when they're finally ready to be done with it, then they sell off to somebody like Bill Gates or the Mormon Church or and the bigger corporations. And now you have like most of the Midwest is all, there's farms everywhere, but they're all essentially owned by John Deere and Ag Credit. It doesn't matter whose name's on the title. They're essentially owned by John Deere and Ag Credit.
That's a good point. I mean,
and I don't know exactly what the answer to that is, but I think I like the small regenerative farm movement. I don't think it scales I don't think it'll ever scale to the point of like industrial agriculture. I think industrial agriculture has its place, but I think it's not all good, for sure. It's definitely not all good.
I mean, regenerative doesn't scale, but it does replicate.
Yeah.
The issue with that is finding, the 5, 10, 20 acres or, the suitable size area to do that in the location where it can be done.
Right.
I can't come out to where you're at and buy 10 acres and homestead it. I will fail.
Yep.
Okay. Somebody might be able to come where I am and homestead 10 acres with sheep, birds, pigs, maybe a cow, and might make it work. Go another 200 miles east, and it works. And it definitely works. So there is opportunity for people to do smaller scale regenerative food production.
Yep.
with multi-species and pay for the land. I'm not sure that, but that's not a blanket statement. That's not true everywhere across the country. You can't go anywhere and buy land and pay for it with multi-species livestock. That's not a blanket statement anymore.
Yeah.
So people have been promised, oh, go to college. Remember our generation? You got to go to college. You got to have a degree or you're not ever going to be worth a shit.
Yep.
I
You
never
want to
went.
be a plumber, do you?
And now what do we have? Not enough damn plumbers. And what do plumbers get paid?
Spooky money.
There's a lot of plumbers that make really good money. And there's a lot of guys our age that are still paying on college debt that have a useless degree in a dead-end job that they hate.
Yep.
That could have been a plumber.
Yep. And some might call that a dead-end job, but it's a dead-end job that pays pretty damn well.
It's a dead-end job that you can own.
Yeah, exactly.
And not be owned by someone else.
Yep. It's South Park did an excellent episode on this about like Randy Marsh. His the oven door was broken or tweaked or something. He kept telling Sharon he was going to fix it, and then he calls a handyman and he's like, "Oh, this is awesome. This guy will just do it for you. I can pay him money and he'll just fix it." And then the handymen get rich, and but there's only like 2 handymen, so it's a long waiting list to get anything fixed. And you're like, well, be handy, learn how to be handy, and you and you don't have nearly as many as those problems. But it's I don't know. That's one of the things I really liked about my dad. I still love about him is he is not the best horseman by a far sight. He's a pretty good horseman. He taught me a lot about it. I learned a lot more once I got out on my own. I learned a lot more just doing it myself. But he's also a pretty decent mechanic as long as it's stuff you can still work on without a computer. He's a pretty good welder. Like, he's not a pipeline guy, but he's a pretty good welder fabricator. He's pretty handy. And because of that, I'm decently handy. I can do some basic mechanic and stuff. I can do some welding. I can do some basic carpentry. I'm overall like kind of somewhat handy at a lot of stuff. I'm really good at diagnosing cattle and handling cattle, but I do a lot of stuff that I can do kind of somewhat okay, and that sure makes life easier. I mean, it makes a lot more work for yourself at times, but it also saves you a lot of money. And so there's something to just being handy as a man. It's like, it's just good to be handy at stuff. And whatever that stuff may be, but like stuff with your hands, it's good to be able to use them.
The more stuff that you can fix on your farm or on your ranch by yourself, yeah, it might take you 2 days and 3 trips to town for parts. Yeah, if you don't have anything else to do and your time's free, that might be an okay investment of your time. If you're buried and swamped at work, it might not be a bad idea to call a professional. There's always, like, I try to find that balance of, well, I don't have anything to do for the next, 5 days, so I might as well get my tools and tear into this thing. Or, hey, this got to work like right now, and I ain't got time to get to it, so I'm just going to call a professional and make it happening.
It makes a big difference when, like, if any young guys are looking into getting into cowboying, like, the type of outfit you go to work for makes a huge difference. So, like, I'm a feedlot guy first and foremost. I've been in it for 15 years now. I started working for the big boys, JBS, Cactus, and you were very specialized in your department. Like, I was a pin rider. I was shipping and receiving, and then pin rider. But you have your set of duties. This is what you do. If tank is broken and you can't fix it by putting the plug back in it, you called another department. You go to work for a smaller operation, particularly like family run. You got to be a little more of a jack of all trades because they don't have an extra department to take care of that. They you're kind of a catch-all. And so if you go to work for a mom and pop outfit, more than likely you're going to have to build some fence. You might have to weld a little bit. You might have to run some hay equipment. But if you go work for, say, like the wine glass or the wine cup, one of the huge spreads, and you're on the Cowboy crew, you're gonna be trotting circles, and that's what you do because they're a big enough outfit. That's how they can have a set Cowboy crew. They have a set fencing crew. They have all that, and it just makes a big difference the type of outfit you work for. And I'm not saying some are good, some are bad on all levels. I'm not saying one type of outfit's better than the others, but there are major differences, and you should be apprised of that going in before as you're looking for a job or whatever. Like that way you're not blindsided by what you have to do.
That's good. I like that. I think it's important to get a broad base of experience from all different kinds of operations, so you can see everything from the small mom and pop operations where everybody's got to wear 16 different hats and you don't outsource anything, to a big corporation where you can just say, that's not my job, and call another department. It's very valuable to get those kinds of experiences I think at a young age.
Yeah.
Matt, this is a tremendous amount of fun. I've got to get going. We need to do this again.
Absolutely.
Why don't you take us out?
All right. Well, thanks everybody for going through the ups and downs, ebbs and flows of this episode and all the side tangents. I think we covered most of what we wanted to talk about in a roundabout way. But I host the Burning Daylight podcast. You can find me wherever podcasts are found. It's BURNIN apostrophe, because I'm cool like that. And Burning Daylight is a show. I started as a podcast for the working cowboy, talking to working cowboys. And that's waned a little bit over the years because trying to gather cowboys up for a conversation is about like herding cats sometimes, especially when technology is involved.
Yes.
But I talk a lot of news and politics, tell a lot of dirty jokes, and just have a good time. I try to make it a show that guys out trotting circles, riding pins, or putting up hay, whatever, can put on and maybe learn a few things and get a good laugh in. So come check me out. You can follow me on all the social medias. It's Burning Daylight Podcast or Matt McKinley. But thanks again, Brian, for having me. This has been a really fun conversation, and we definitely need to do it again on my show or yours, either one. This has been fun. So thanks for listening, and come check me out.
Yeah, go check them out. I know I'll probably be listening to some Burning Daylight this afternoon when I'm out running some fence and moving some cows.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you, gang. Have a great week. We'll see you.